Everyone's talking about talks at the moment. But I don't believe for a moment that talks with the European Union on cooperation and collaboration will ever end. And that's not because I've given up on them reaching some sort of conclusion, but because I hope that they don't end. Why not? Because we're neighbours. We've got a lot of common interests and a lot of common concerns. And whether we have an agreement in time for it to be implemented in full by the end of the transition period or not, we will always be talking to and agreeing things with the European Union. We should also, and I would expect that we will, talk with many other countries and organisations around the world, and we will reach certain agreements with them. To succeed, we have to be an outward-looking nation, respected and trusted by our friends and allies abroad, and we've got to work with them on issues of common concern. So, as talks with the EU are quite possibly in their final hours before it's too late to have an agreement in time for it to be implemented by the end of the year, do not think that's the end of the matter. However, if there is an agreement, what's it going to be looking like? Well, firstly, for me, the test is whether or not the agreement leaves the UK independent in all areas of law, government and public administration. If it fails in that test, if any powers over law, government or public administration are ceded to Brussels in that agreement, Brexit, in my view, will not have been delivered. But there's a lot of disinformation going around as well. An agreement with the European Union does not mean a treaty with the European Union. Many agreements are not treaties. The key distinguishing feature of a treaty is that it is binding. For example, the United Nations Charter, which created the United Nations. This is a binding agreement. The UN, as a body, has the power to sanction us if we do not comply, and thus it is a treaty. Many other international agreements are not treaties because sovereign states can decide whether they want to comply or not. Compliance is based on their continued agreement and principle, not international law. Another example of a treaty is the Convention on the Law of the Sea. Now, I mention this because it's important. It is this treaty, this international law, that states that independent sovereign coastal states, the UK is one, have full rights over the exploration, exploitation and management of all resources, living and non-living, so including fish, within our 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone. And that is why Boris Johnson would be wrong to give in to EU demands on fishing. Those demands would require us to cede certain decision-making powers over our own international legal rights in terms of our own fishing grounds, those grounds that extend 200 nautical miles out from our coastline, to a foreign power. In other words, the European Union, which is, after all, a foreign power. We would be the only independent coastal state in the world to do that. The Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change are two other examples of treaties, as is the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide. The treaties forming the European Union, the Maastricht and Lisbon treaties, are also obvious, it's in the name, treaties. But we are not going to be entering into any treaty with the European Union. That would be to rejoin the European Union. That's not going to happen. But if not a treaty with the European Union, what type of agreement might we get? Well, the EU is legally only able to enter into three other types of agreement. The first one is customs unions, which obviously we don't want. If we wanted to be in a customs union with the EU, that would require us to cede all sorts of decision-making and legal authorities back to Brussels again, and that's not going to happen. We might as well rejoin. It's not going to happen. Association agreements are the second type. Now, association agreements or free trade agreements are much the same thing. These have the purpose of removing or reducing customs tariffs in a bilateral trade agreement. Now, we know we're unlikely to get a free trade agreement at the moment because we will not agree to the EU's conditions attached to such a free trade agreement, because those conditions, again, require us to cede decision-making powers to Brussels, which we won't do. That would be contrary to regaining our full sovereignty in all areas of law, government and public administration. And the third type of agreement is called a partnership and cooperation agreement. These agreements, partnership and cooperation agreements, provide a general framework for bilateral relations, and that's what Australia has with the European Union. It has a partnership framework agreement with the European Union. That agreement covers cooperation in foreign policy, global security, expanding the bilateral trade and investment, cooperation on climate change, on the environment, on energy, on fisheries, and even on forestry. And it includes cooperation in science, research, technology, innovation, education, culture, and the movement of people. So, when we talk of an Australian type agreement, that is what is meant, a partnership agreement, not a treaty. A partnership agreement will establish a joint commission or a committee to arbitrate over disputes, but, and this is the essential point, the UK wouldn't be compelled to comply with EU law, decisions of the EU Parliament, or directives from the European Commission. A treaty would require us, would compel us to comply with such things. So it's misleading to say that we might be going into a treaty. We will not be. So when the Prime Minister or the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, talk about discussions now aiming at a partnership agreement, that is an Australian type agreement, not a treaty. And because we do want to cooperate on matters of common interest and concern, such as law, security, environment, trade, etc. And when I say law, I mean justice, law enforcement. And because the EU can only do that through a partnership agreement, and as partnership agreements do not mean that we have to cede any powers to Brussels, a partnership agreement is the best outcome. Without a partnership agreement, we will have no agreement on any of these issues. On law, on security, on foreign policy, no framework for cooperation. And remember, as I said earlier, it is a partnership framework agreement that Australia has with the European Union. So let us not talk about treaties. We want an agreement, we want to cooperate, there has to be a framework for that, there has to be an agreement, and the right vehicle for it is a partnership agreement.